Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Harry Lasenesiris, and this is my chess YouTube channel, grecochess. We're continuing the series of presenting games suggested to me by my Facebook friends. And today's Facebook friend is Jay Kleinman, whom I know in person. Jay Kleinman is the tournament director for the tournaments that take place at the Queen's Chess Club in Floral Park, New York. He's a very nice and warm person, and he was very encouraging about my YouTube channel. The game that he selected for me to present is one that he played last March 2025, that is, against Vladimir Polyakin. The ratings of the two players, the FIDE ratings, Jay Kleinman is ahead by about 200 points, about 2000 versus 1800, while in the United States Chess Federation, it's the other way around. Vladimir is higher than Jay, about 200 points. If you wonder how this can happen, it's because different tournaments are calculated for each of the ratings. In general, I prefer to use the FIDE ratings because we are showing people from different countries, and using FIDE puts everybody on the same basis. Now let's go to the chessboard to see what actually happened. Just to tell you in advance that Vladimir had the white pieces and Jay had the black. Also, you're going to see on the right part of the screen, what does the computer think about the situation? A positive number plus means white is better, a negative number minus means that black is better. Computer will show if the move they played is the best, if not, which could have been the best. And when the other player is going to play, which are their best three options. The first four moves of each player are what are called book moves, meaning they have been analyzed in opening databases and they are common. We'll go quickly through them. White sends knight to f3, black sends pawn to c6, pawn to c4 for white, pawn to d5 for black, pawn to e3 for white, knight to f6 for black, pawn to b3 for white, and bishop to g4 for black. You're going to see that the score is more or less equal, very small advantage for white, just because white started fast. It is called, as you see here, the English opening Caro-Kann defensive system. It's English opening because we have the c pawn going to c4, and Caro-Kann because black sends the pawn from c7 to c6. Now the players will get out of the book, meaning they'll have to think of their own, and let's see how they continued. Move number 5. White asks the question that is called, meaning pawn goes to h3, and black needs to think. Should they keep the pin on the knight on f3? Should they exchange against the knight? Or should the bishop go back? These are the three options they have. So white decides to keep the pins. Bishop goes to h5. White breaks the pin with bishop to e2. Black sends pawn to e6. White fianchettos the dark-colored bishop, goes to b2. Fianchetto means he controls the big diagonal that goes from a1 to h8. Black will send the knight from b8 to d7. White sends the knight to c3. Black sends the bishop to d6. White sends a pawn to d4, and black the pawn to h6. And now we'll complete the first 10 moves with white sending the rook to c1. Good is the computer, and from positive, the evaluation becomes negative, meaning black starts having a very small advantage. Black is going to castle now, king side. We completed the first 10 moves where black has a very small advantage. Let's see what happens next. Move number 11, white is going to castle, and black will send the rook to c8. White sends a knight to e5, a nice central square. Well, unfortunately, it's for white. Of course, it's not an outpost because black later could send the pawn to f6 and force the knight to go away. Black needs to be careful because suddenly the bishop at h5 is exposed. If black doesn't play carefully, White can take the bishop, knight takes bishop, and queen takes knight. White is one piece ahead. Also, another catch, if the knight was not here, now it's not possible. If black knight takes knight, then the pawn taking knight would create a fork. But now this is not possible because the knight. But if the knight was not here, that would happen. Black needs to think of these things. Don't wait for the last moment to think when it's too late. Black is going to take the bishop at e2, and white is going to take it with the knight. With the knight, white had two choices, either with the knight or with the queen, but with the knight now the bishop is much more free than before. And really now if black knight takes the white knight, white wins a piece with the fork, meaning double attack. Of course, at that level, you don't expect your opponent to make such a mistake, but you eliminate one of their options. It might be a small detail, but these small details, little by little, can add up. Let's see how the two players will continue. Black sends the queen to c7. Now look what's happening. If black would play again, black could now really take the knight because pawn takes a knight, bishop takes a pawn, bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and black is ahead. And white needs to deal with this situation. Instead of doing some other attack, you force him to deal with that. How does white deal with this? Pawn goes to f4. And now the knight is adequately protected. In fact, now you cannot take the knight, black takes white, because then you really have a fork. The negative part of this idea, well, on the positive side, yes, you protect your knight much better, but on the other side, the diagonal going from a7 to g1 is, I wouldn't say open, but not so tight as before, meaning these two pawns, e3 and d4 would disappear. Black could easily check and under different conditions, perhaps even have a black attack. And of course, the worst case scenario is if white puts the queen to f2 or e3, and the bishop is somewhere like b6, the queen could be pinned and lost. At lower level games, and this includes myself, games have been won and lost because of something like that. Now, how does black continue? Move number 14 was white send the pawn to f4, and black is going to send the knight to e4, to the center. Also making possible the pawn goes to f6 and kicks out the knight if necessary. Now e4 is a very nice square for the black knight, and now this is really an outpost because both the t and the f pawns have advanced and cannot kick out the knight. White is going to send the knight on c3, hoping to exchange the knights because the one at e4 is too irritating. And that's what black is going to do, because if white exchanges, the pawn on e4 will not be very stable. So we exchange the knights, and black decides to send the pawn to f5. As I have mentioned in previous videos, here you see it says inaccuracy. Before you send the pawn to f5, you need to think of it very seriously because pawns cannot go back, meaning the e6 pawn now is backward. It's protected neither from the d or from the f side. Currently, it's not attacked, but if in the future it's attacked, it can only be defended by pieces. So really, and also this is near the king, not just any pawn. So really, before you move your f pawn, whether white or black, you must think of it very carefully. One coach said, but tongue-in-cheek, of course, that he would like you to put glue on the f pawn so the players cannot touch it. What does white do? White sends the queen to h5. And computer says it's inaccuracy. We're fortunate to have the notes by J. Kleinman, and we are going to read what does J. Kleinman have to say about this move. J says the following. I didn't see the point of the queen sortie, and neither does Stockfish. The queen on h5 just helps black develop and doesn't find an attack. As we go on, we're going to stop at various points and read Jay's notes. How does black react to that? Now black starts having some kind of advantage, 0.63. Black sends a knight to f6, attacking the queen. The queen is supposed to be there for an attack with the help of other pieces and threaten the black king, but not if the white queen is self-attacked. The queen goes now to g6. Black queen goes to e7. Knight goes to d3 for white. Black knight goes to e4. And white sends the rook to f3, hoping to strengthen the attack. Here again, we're going to read from Jay's note. The computer says a mistake, and now black's advantage becomes much more serious, 1.60. Now let's see what Jay has to say. White had to play bishop to e1 to answer rook to f6 with bishop to h4. Rook goes to f6 for black, and you see that now if the bishop was at h4, if bishop was at e1 and then h4, then if black took the white queen, then white could take the black queen. And at this point, we completed the first 20 moves, and we see that black little by little starts building an advantage. 1.69 may not be yet the one that guarantees victory, but it starts being important. For white, queen goes to h5, saves the queen, and the black king goes to h7. And the white queen now goes to h4. Let's see what Jake has to say about this move. Bishop to e1 was still best, but black would still be seriously better. And black sends the pawn to g5. It's the best in the computer, and Jay gives an exclamation mark to that and says, white's premature queen quote-unquote invasion did lead to a decisive attack, but not the one envisioned. I think he means that this led to a decisive attack, but black's attack, not white's. Queen goes to h5 now. Rook goes, and this is a mistake. You see now, black's advantage becomes even more important, 3.53. Rook goes to g6. Knight goes to e5. And bishop takes to e5. This is move number 24 for black, and let's see what Jake has to say in his notes. Of course, the exchange of a dead bishop for a strong knight is a no-brainer. The dead bishop, of course, was this one here in e5. Now and before, the knight was very strong on e5. The pawn takes at e5. And now we exchange pawns on f4. And the black knight will go to g3. This is move number 26. Let's see what Jake has to say. Black goes from +8 to +3 with this. As soon as I played it, I realized white could exchange his queen for a rook and a knight and regretted it. International Master G Pawning, watching from next board, thought rook from c to g8 was the move. It was a good move, but he didn't consider the nifty rook sack in the next move. As the saying goes, in such positions, all roads lead to Rome. J would have played instead rook goes to g2 instead of the knight going to g3. And then later he has some analysis of what would happen if instead the rook had gone to g2. A brilliant way to bring the win home. But in any case, he played the rook goes to g3. Well, the advantage didn't go from +8 to +3. It went from +4.5 to about 2. What does white play? White takes the knight at g3. And let's see Jay's notes. White drops the exchange rather than part with a lady, meaning the queen, of course. Rook takes to g3, and now black has an extra exchange, an advantage of more than 3 points. Bishop goes to e1 to attack the rook, and rook goes to g8. Bishop goes to h4, little by little. White is trying to bring the bishop to the attack and threatens the black queen, and the queen goes to e8. Queen goes to e2 for white. Rook goes to g6. Black, this is inaccuracy on the computer. Black would try to have queen and 2 rooks on the g file, threatening the black king. We finish now 30 moves. Black has an advantage, smaller than the advantage they had before, but still it's important one, 166. Let's continue the game. Bishop goes to f6 for white. This is a nice square for the white bishop. You understand, if somehow a rook or a queen could go to h8 and of course not be attacked by the black pieces, that would be a mate. Queen goes to d7 for black. We'll change the c pawns. We exchange also the rooks. Of course, if white could change everything, have bishop versus rook, that would be a draw. But with so many pawns, not going to be so. Queen goes to b5 for white. You see, if white could get rid of this queen and send his own queen to h8, that would have been made. Black queen goes to c1 with a check. If this was not a check, white would win because the white queen would invade and threaten with mate. King goes to h2. Move number 35 for white. And let's see what Jay has to say in his notes. Again, I had memories of blown wings and realized that grabbing the pawn on f4 would lead to mate because I couldn't finish white off. What Matthew Fischler correctly pointed out afterward was that I didn't need to finish white off and could check again from c1 and cover white threats. As Falkland wrote, the pass is never dead. It isn't even passed. I'd like to share with you the feeling. Yes, when you have a winning position, you'd better be very scared. I'm always scared because one small mistake and everything disappears. And from winning, you are losing. And you see that's only because it was check that the black queen could keep black in the game. What can black do? You see, black can take a pawn at f4 and it's increases the material advantage. But James felt a little scared to do it, would rather exchange the queens, being up the exchange, sends the queen to c6. To c6. It's a miss in the computer. And from about 5 points difference goes down to about 2.5. Queen goes to b4 for white. Queen to d7 for black. Bishop goes to e7 for white. Now this is a mistake and the difference becomes more than 4 points for black. Black will send the pawn to d4. Black would like to promote this pawn if possible, not easy to stop it. Bishop goes to c5 for white. Queen to c6 for black, and you see there is a threat of mating one on the square g2. White stops the mate threat by setting the pawn to g4. The f-pawn takes on g4, and the queen takes to d4, so the d-pawn is not going to get promoted. But let's see what Jay has to say in his notes about this move. Mate in 10, but there was nothing better. Well, was it mate in 10? Let's see what the computer says. The computer says mate in 17 moves. and the pawn takes on h3. And now we're talking about mate in 11 moves. You see, the threat is g2. If black would play second move in a row, queen goes to g2, and that's it. Since that cannot happen, what can white do now? If he takes the pawn on h3, queen goes to g2, king goes to h4, and then queen to g4 mate. If black would send the queen, for example, to f2, then we can have check from g2, and then the queen is lost. Either king goes to h3 and rook takes the queen, or if queen takes the rook, then queen takes the queen is mate. So at this point, Vladimir Polyakin resigned. And let's give a look at the game to see not what happened, but what did the computer think about this game. 80.5% for Vladimir Polyakin, 89% for Jay Kleinman. Let's see their ratings. Both players played quite better than their ratings, both the FIDE and the United States Chess Federation, but Jay Kleinman played for a rating of 2400 versus 2150 for Vladimir Polyakin. The various categories, none of them had a brilliant move. Jay had one great, best 19 versus 13. Excellent moves. 7 for Vladimir and 6 for Jay. Good 11 versus 5. Book moves, 4 moves each of them. And in the negative category, inaccuracies, 4 for Jay, 2 for Vladimir. Mistakes, 3 for Vladimir, 1 for Jay, and none of them had any misses or blunders. Congratulations, of course, to Jay for his win. This concludes my coverage of this game. With a few more games by my Facebook friends, we'll show them in the next few days. As I mentioned before, what do we have ahead? Tomorrow in Albany, New York, we have the United States Chess Federation. I plan to participate. I'm going to show my games that I'm going to play there. Perhaps show some other games of the players, if that's possible. September 7th is the 82nd Chessanity Tournament. They once again have the quad system, so I'm expected to play 3 games against the other 3 top-rated players. The tournament. September 5th, Friday, is when the next series of the Queen's Chess Club tournament is starting. And that's it for now. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching the videos. Thanks for subscribing, the ones of you that subscribed. If you have not subscribed, please consider clicking this subscribe button. Just takes one moment. If you have any comments, I'd like to read them. If you like the videos, you can also click the like button. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.